Hey guys, welcome to my first video that's with, well, it's my first vlog without showing my face. So it's just basically like a log slash rant video. Anyway, today we'll be talking about a steamship that's been destroyed off the coast of New South Wales, I'm pretty sure. And it's called the SS Lady Darling, and it is one hell of a ship to try and figure out because well, up until yesterday, all sources that I had pointed towards, well, there being no drawings of it, there was no photos of it. Up until now we had a half disintegrated ship that kind of looked like this, and as you can see there isn't really a lot left of it. And as we come in to look at the back end of the ship, we'll see that even what very little we have left of the ship, there really isn't a lot left of it. It's mostly just a empty hull with some collapsed decking and maybe a few chunks of engine left, but aside from that, it's pretty much fucked. So there was those guys who were making a 3D map of it, and they did a lot of really good work on it. I have to give them that. And they had a lot of good research on the ship to figure out where it came from and all that, and they have a hell of a good. They have a very, very good bloody story description of it. They basically go through its entire history, tell us what it was like, and all that. And in that, they give us some details, and they are not super helpful, but they are good enough to have a very basic description. She's an iron-hulled screw steamer with an engine in the back. She was built in 1864, which is a bloody long time ago, over in Liverpool. And she was only around 240 feet long and weighed around, well, almost 900 tons. And she only had 2 and a brake decks, which is a pain in the ass because, well, it's nearly impossible for me to figure out what that means. Like, does that mean there's like two decks in the hull, or does it count the decks above the hull? Which back then there really wouldn't have been a lot of ships that had that, I admit, but still, I'm not even sure if they count the bridge that's kind of elevated above the deck as a deck of itself, but whatever. It had 3 masts, which are probably the most identifying feature that I have for the ship. So, anyway, these guys who were studying the wreck, unfortunately, they aren't super helpful. They looked at the wreck and they looked at some profiles of similar ships of the time, like this boat, the Tanfield, and then there's this other boat called the Mary Nixon, both of which are three-masted steamers of the same time with a rear-loaded engine. I also chucked in a picture of a boat called I think it's called the Wanimera, or something like that, and she sank in roughly around the same area, and she looked very much like the Lady Darling. Well, at least according to history. But unfortunately, I didn't have much to go on when it came aside from that. So basically, yeah, you have the gist. You have this. They used these ships to build what they thought the profile of the ship might look like. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit the way I do my modelling. So I was trying to 3D model the Lady Darling as she would have been in real life, and I found something very unusual, because whenever I made the ship the size that I that because I always have my decks that are set to the same fixed height. Like this, I have the same deck height on each ship, so that way I keep the scale fairly consistent. Unfortunately, the Lady Darling doesn't seem to accept that logic. The first time I did it, I accidentally made a whole new steamer because I was like the people who did the PDF that I'm going to leave in the description, by the way. That I used reference pictures of other ships along with basic descriptions of the Lady Darling herself before I finally made a model, and I'm quite proud of how it looks. Unfortunately, last night I was looking at how the ship was scaled and it didn't seem right, so I checked it out, and I accidentally made her a lot bigger than she should have been. She is meant to be 240 feet long, and I made her around 290. So I scaled her again because I accidentally the first time I made the mistake of using the cargo deck as my main reference for deck height. So I used one of the bow areas for the second try. Unfortunately, now the boat's too small. Now she's 166 feet long, which is a problem. So by the time I got the ship to its actual length of 240 feet, I found out that the decks are too tall there. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely certain that there were ships back then that had really tall decks for their crew. But you have to remember, this is a small, outdated cargo steamer built in Liverpool. I really don't think that their tiny little bow cabins would have been super tall and luxurious. So anyway, I take a minute to ponder on this because despite me completely improvising on the superstructure of my model, the rest of the ship is fairly salvageable. So I can simply take out the superstructure and the deck hatches, relay the deck, and suddenly I can scale the ship to whatever size I want and it won't contradict anything. So I posed this question to my friend on the internet today, and so that he could check it out, and he still reckons that my model's awesome, which I kind of agree because I'm a bit of a dickhead that way, and I happen to be going on the State Library of Victoria because back then there was a ship called the SS Barrable. And it's not directly related to Lady Darling, but hold on a minute, because I'm a 3D modeler and a little bit of a boat nerd. When the Lady Darling sank, the crew were picked up by another steamer, don't remember its name, don't really care, and anyway they went back to Sydney. And from Sydney they got on a ship called the SS Barrable, which actually intrigued me a lot because that ship's known as the Great Australian Ram, as in it rammed and sank several ships because it was so terrible at steering. It was not a very good ship. Anyway, the story of the Barrable intrigued me enough that I went on the State Library website to see if I could find any more pictures of it, because it turns out pictures of ships back then are fairly rare. And just for shits and giggles, I looked up what the Lady Darling would look like, because, well, according to my PDF, there should be no plans nor photos of the Lady Darling. So, evidently, this shouldn't exist. This is completely different to what I modelled. It is, don't get me wrong, she's a beautiful steamer. She's a beautiful, beautiful steamer. Unfortunately, she's exactly not what I wanted. let me rephrase that. She's exactly not what my model is, because the plans that PDF gave me was sketchy at best. Like, don't get me wrong, you guys did the best you could, but just remember, next time when the ship is registered in Melbourne, maybe you should look at the state in which Melbourne is in, and you'll find pictures of it, because sadly your PDF makes it seem like there's no visual record of what the ship looked like, when here is a picture of it, right here. And it looks nothing like my model, and it perfectly matches its description too, which really irks me, because in the PDF, again, I'm sorry for trashing on you guys, because you guys are bloody awesome. I love your PDF. I read it every time I think about the Lady Darling, because it's a very good PDF. But the PDF describes the Lady Darling as a straight-bowed steamer with a stern engine, a single propeller. She has a big elliptical stern, which up until now I didn't know what that meant, and she has got 3 big masts. I didn't know that yeah, she's got 3 masts, alright. And by the looks of them, they look like they're ready to sail, with actual sails instead of what I believed, which honestly fucks me up a little bit. Sorry for swearing. So anyway, that's just heartbreaking, because not only do I have a ship that I'm really proud of that I built, it is now a farce, because up until now I had no visual record to prove what I had built was wrong, and now it's wrong. Oh well, life can go on, I guess. We can work on that. Anyway, I think I'm going to start talking about the life of the Lady Darling, even though this video is already way too long. So anyway, the Lady Darling was built in Liverpool, and for a little while she just kind of bounced back and forth around Britain. And apparently she wasn't very fast, only managing... The only actual speed record we have of her was when she was under full sail, apparently with her engine running, but no one really knows for sure, and she was making around 7 knots. So naturally, I assume that that's not quite her top speed, and in my simulator I have her running at around 8 knots. But even that is horribly slow. Don't try it, because it'll take you forever to get anywhere. Anyway, eventually she came over to Melbourne, and, well, she wasn't a very good ship. Well, she was, but she wasn't consistent at all, because she couldn't pick up a regular route. She would go from one place to another place to another place to another place. She's not going back and forth between one place, because she couldn't pick up a stable route, and because of that she kind of had to go back to Britain. Eventually, some other jackass who lived either in Melbourne or Newcastle, don't know which, he bought the Lady Darling, and apparently he was familiar with her because she was his first iron-hulled steamship. So she became his flagship for a little while, and she quickly picked up a route between Melbourne and Newcastle. She even got lengthened at one point, which I'm pretty sure she was lengthened before she went to Newcastle. Anyway, she was lengthened, and she went back and forth between Melbourne and Newcastle, and at some point in 1880, excuse me, in 1880, when Ned Kelly was about to get hanged, she was steaming along something island. I know that it's a really cool island, and it's got a really cool lighthouse that I'm going to build at some point as well. Anyway, she goes near this island, and the crew of the ship maintained that they had put a long distance between them and the island, but whatever. They Something hit them on the side, which most people think was a reef, which doesn't really make sense considering that the people on board swear it was like getting rammed, like the whole ship was shook and the ship rolled heavily from side to side after it got hit by something. Probably still the reef, maybe they were a bit of a liar, because, you don't nab in your captain. So, anyway, water starts flooding into the stern, which is where all the engines are, and that floods pretty damn quickly. So they leave the ship, and apparently it was getting really damn windy. Sorry. Apparently it was getting really damn windy around this time, and they just kind of sat there in their boats looking up at the Lady Darling as her bows rose out of the water like a reverse Titanic. And she went down back end first. Apparently her rudder might have come off halfway through the sinking. And at this point, I thought that that's when her stern got crushed flat, when her stern hit the sand. Unfortunately, it turns out she was just built that way, and I was a little bit of an idiot. So anyway, the following morning, a steamer comes along, and they see the foremast and the mainmast still sticking out of the water. And over in the water, there was a black lifeboat with the words "Lady Darling of Melbourne," and they apparently picked up the crew and noted the wreck of the ship, and then they kept moving. And it wasn't until 1996 when the Lady Darling was found again, when she was caught on a trawler. And by then, she was not in very good condition. Her entire midship was collapsed, her stern was, well, basically the way it is now, actually. And the bow, with nothing supporting it from the sides of the ship, it just kind of fell over on its side. So, which I guess is why the people in the PDF gave her a raked bow instead of a straight stem, like we see in this picture again. Damn this picture, it's ruined my entire thing. So yeah, there's my rant on the SS Lady Darling. Well, that was, yeah. Shit. Oh, that's right. The island's called Montague Island. Should have remembered that earlier. Okay, well, yeah.